June 13th, 1944. 0900 hours. Outside Villers-Bocage, Normandy. The air inside the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger is a thick soup of diesel fumes, burnt grease, and the metallic tang of spent shell casings. Untersturmführer Klaus Richter wipes a smear of oil from his brow, his eyes pressed hard against the rubber padding of the TZF-9B binocular sight. Through the heat haze shimmering over a lush hedgerow, he sees them. 3 olive-drab silhouettes, boxy and tall, churning through the soft French soil. Shermans, his loader, Hans, snorts with a derisive laugh. The Americans brought their Ronson lighters to the picnic. One spark and they all go up. Richter doesn't smile, but he feels the familiar surge of confidence. His Tiger, a 54-ton beast of Krupp steel, feels invincible. He watches the lead M4 Sherman, a standard 75mm model, clamber over a stone wall. It looks like a toy compared to the predatory lines of the Panther or the sheer brutality of his Tiger. Range 800. Richter calls out, his voice calm over the internal intercom. Armor piercing. Target the lead unit. The Tiger's 88mm KWK-36 gun traverses with a mechanical whine. The gunner, Meyer, makes a final adjustment. Crack. The massive tank rocks back on its wide tracks. A split second later, a blossom of orange flame erupts from the Sherman's flank. The hit is clean, devastating. The American tank stops instantly, smoke billowing from the engine deck. 2 figures scramble out of the hatches, diving into the tall grass as the machine begins to burn. 1 down. Meyer grunts, already cranking the handle for the next shot. They never learn. Why do they keep driving those tin cans into the jaws of a Tiger? Richter watches the remaining 2 Shermans reverse frantically, popping smoke canisters that shroud the meadow in a gray chemical fog. To the German crew, it's a familiar scene, almost a routine. They have spent years on the Eastern Front facing the T-34. These American tanks seem like a regression. They are too tall, their armor is too thin, and their guns are laughable against the frontal plate of a heavy Panzer. By noon, the meadow is a graveyard of smoldering American steel. Richter's platoon has accounted for 5 Shermans without taking a single scratch. As they retire to the tree line to refuel, the crew shares a cigarette, laughing about the Tommy cookers and the Yankee coffins. They believe the battle for this sector is won. They believe the Americans have run out of armor. But as the sun begins to dip, the sound of clattering tracks returns. Richter climbs back into the commander's cupola, squinting against the glare. Emerging from the same smoke-blackened meadow, passing the charred husks of the tanks destroyed just hours ago, is a fresh column of Shermans. Richter frowns. He recognizes the markings on one of the wrecks they passed, a white star painted slightly off-center. But behind it, a tank that looks identical to the one he gutted at 0900 hours is moving toward him. It has the same chalked nickname on the side. Lucky Legs II. Except, the last time Richter saw Lucky Legs, it was a funeral pyre. Now, it is roaring forward, its 75mm gun leveled directly at his position. The laughter in the Tiger dies out, replaced by a creeping realization. The Sherman isn't just a tank. It's a symptom of an industrial machine that doesn't know how to stop. June 14th, 1944. 0200 hours. Maintenance Depot, U.S. 3rd Armored Division, Normandy. 2 miles behind the American front lines, the night is not silent. It screams with the screech of metal on metal, the hiss of oxyacetylene torches, and the rhythmic thud of pneumatic wrenches. This is the realm of the grease monkeys, the Ordnance Maintenance Battalions. Sergeant Hank Miller kicks a spent shell casing across the muddy floor of a makeshift workshop under a camouflage net. Before him sits a battered M4 Sherman, its turret scarred by a 75mm German high-velocity round that skimmed the mantlet. The tank smells of wet wool, hydraulic fluid, and the metallic tang of dried blood. "She's a mess, Sarge," a young mechanic shouts over the roar of a nearby generator. Internal fire suppressed. But the radio's fried and the vertical stabilizer is jammed. Hank doesn't look up from his clipboard. "We've got 3 more coming in from the 67th Armored. Get the crane. We're swapping the engine out of that burnt-out wreck in the yard and putting it in this one. If the hull isn't cracked, it's a runner." To the Germans, a knocked-out tank is a casualty. To the Americans, it is a collection of spare parts. While the German Panther is a masterpiece of engineering, finicky, over-engineered, and requiring a factory-trained technician for a simple transmission fix. The Sherman was designed for the assembly line. Every bolt, every gear, every sprocket is standardized. Hank watches as a recovery vehicle, an M32 tank recovery vehicle based on the same Sherman chassis, drags another dead M4 into the light, and it has a jagged hole in the side plate. By dawn, the hole will be patched with a slab of armor cut from a donor tank, the interior will be hosed out, and a fresh crew will be sitting in the seats. "Paint it," Hank commands, pointing to the patched hull. "Olive drab. Make it look like it just rolled off the boat from Detroit." This is the Lazarus effect that was beginning to drive the German Panzertruppen to the brink of madness. A German crew might spend 3 days painstakingly repairing a final drive on a Tiger, only to find that the 3 Shermans they destroyed yesterday have been replaced by 6 today. The Sherman was built for float, a logistical concept where for every tank in combat, 3 more were in the pipeline or being repaired. Back at the front, Richter's crew is exhausted when their Tiger's interleaved road wheels are clogged with the thick, clay-like mud of Normandy. To fix the inner wheels, they have to remove the outer ones first. A back-breaking 8-hour job under the constant threat of Allied Jabos, fighter bombers. They don't care about quality. Meyer, the gunner, spits as he tries to pry a rock out of the Tiger's drive sprocket. "They just throw more steel at us. It's not a war anymore, Richter. It's a factory floor." Richter looks through his binoculars again. The sun is rising over the hedgerows, and the silhouette of Lucky Legs 2 is back. Beside it are 2 more Shermans, their paint still tacky, their engines humming with a terrifying mechanical reliability. The Germans had won the skirmish, but they were losing the war of attrition. Every time they killed a Sherman, Gertwit felt like they were merely pruning a hedge that grew back thicker by noon. June 16th, 1944. 14:30 hours. The corridor of death, south of Tilly-sur-Seulles. The humidity of the French summer hangs heavy, smelling of clover and rotting cattle. Inside the Tiger, the temperature has soared to over 100 degrees. Richter's loader, Hans, is stripped to his undershirt, his skin glistening with sweat and graphite dust. They have been in the line for 48 hours straight. "Movement! 2 o'clock!" Meyer yells, his hands flying to the Trevor's wheels. Richter snaps his goggles down. Through the shimmering heat, he sees a Sherman. But something is wrong. It's the same tank he hit yesterday, the one with the distinctive Lucky Legs scrawl. He'd watched the 88mm shell punch through the side hull. He'd watched the crew bail out. He'd seen the black soot licking the turret ring. Yet, there it is. The hole in the side is covered by a crude, rectangular slab of mismatched steel, welded on with the hurried strokes of a man who had 10 more to do before midnight. The tank looks like a Frankenstein's monster of armor plate, but its Continental radial engine is roaring with a healthy, defiant rhythm. "It's a ghost," Haynes whispers, his voice cracking. "We killed that one, Untersturmführer. I saw it burn." "It's not a ghost, it's a machine." Richter snaps, though his heart hammers against his ribs. "Target! Fire!" The Tiger barks again. The 88mm round strikes the Sherman's lower glacis. The American tank shudders, a spray of sparks flying as the heavy shell deflects into the ground. The Sherman doesn't stop. It pivots on one track, its 75mm gun snapping toward the Tiger's muzzle flash. Clang. A high explosive shell bursts against the Tiger's thick frontal armor. It doesn't penetrate. The 75mm is too weak for that. But the concussion is like being inside a giant bell struck by a sledgehammer. Flakes of paint and Zimmerit anti-magnetic paste shower the German crew. Their ears ring. The smell of ozone fills the cabin. "They just keep coming," Meyer says, his voice rising in pitch. "We kill 5, and 10 more crawl out of the mud. We kill those 10, and the first 5 are back from the dead." Richter realizes the psychological toll is heavier than the physical one. In the German army, a tank lost is a hole in the line that stays open. For the Americans, the Sherman is a modular, replaceable tool. The U.S. Army's Ordnance Department has turned the battlefield into a giant, open-air workshop. And while the Germans treat their panzers like thoroughbred horses, elegant but fragile, the Americans treat the Sherman like a mass-produced shovel. Suddenly, the air is filled with a terrifying whoosh of Allied artillery. The Shermans aren't just attacking. They are spotting. They are the eyes of a massive industrial hydra. Richter watches as Lucky Legs 2 pops a red smoke grenade. "Retreat," Richter orders. "Back to the secondary line." As the Tiger reverses, its heavy tracks churning the earth, Richter looks back one last time. He sees the recovery vehicles, those vultures, as the Germans called them, already creeping out of the tree line under the cover of the barrage. They aren't there to scavenge. They are there to resurrect. He knows that by tomorrow morning, the tank he just hit will be hosed out, welded shut, and sent back to find him. June 18th, 1944, 1100 hours, near St. Lo, Normandy. The sky is no longer blue. It is a crisscross of vapor trails and the black puffs of flak. For Richter's crew, the war has narrowed down to the view through a dirty periscope. They haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time in a week. The Tiger's engine is coughing, a rhythmic skip in the cylinders suggesting a fouled fuel line. A repair that would require a specialized crane and a secure rear area workshop they no longer possess. Movement in the orchard, Meyer whispers. He doesn't even use the intercom anymore. The silence in the tank is heavy with dread. Richter traverses his binoculars. He expects to see a fresh platoon of Shermans. Instead, he sees something worse, a column of M4s. But these are different. Some have sandbags piled high on their hulls, held in place by chicken wire. Others have spare track links welded across their turrets like scales on a dragon. They look scarred, battered, and utterly indifferent to the terror they should be feeling. "Look at the markings, Untersturmführer," Hans says, his voice trembling. "That one. The one in the lead. It has the same dent on the stowage bin as the one we knocked out at the crossroads 3 days ago." Richter feels a chill that the summer heat cannot touch. He recognizes it. It's not just the same model of tank, it is the same physical object. The Americans aren't just replacing their losses. They are recycling them with a speed that defies German military logic. In the German Wehrmacht, if a Panzer IV or a Panther is brewed up, burnt out, it is a total loss. The tempered steel loses its hardness in the heat of a fire, and the internal mechanisms melt into a useless slag. But the Sherman is different. Its cast or welded hulls are spacious, its components easily accessed through large hatches. If a Sherman catches fire, the American crews use onboard extinguishers, and if that fails, the ordnance boys simply pull the engine, scrub the char from the interior, and bolt in a new power pack. They are mocking us? Meyer snarls, his thumb white-knuckled on the firing trigger. We are elite. We are the Schwer Panzerabteilung, and we are being beaten by a garage in Detroit. A shell whistles overhead. Not a tank round, but a heavy 155mm long tom from the American divisional artillery. It slams into a nearby Panther, flipping the 45-ton machine onto its side like a dead beetle. Immediately, the Shermans begin to advance, firing on the move. They don't have the long-range precision of the Tiger, but they have stabilizers that allow them to keep their guns level while bouncing over the rugged terrain. Richter watches a Sherman take a hit from a hidden 7.5-centimeter PaK-40 anti-tank gun in the hedgerow. The Sherman's track snaps, its drive sprocket shattered. In any other army, that tank is out of the fight. But the Sherman simply rotates its turret, suppresses the German gun pit with its .50 caliber machine gun, and waits. Through the dust, Richter sees an M32 recovery vehicle already darting out from behind a stone wall, its winches humming. They aren't even waiting for the battle to end to start the repairs. Target the recovery vehicle, Richter yells. If we stop the mechanics, we stop the tanks. But as Meyer adjusts the sights, a swarm of P-47 Thunderbolts screams down from the clouds, their 500-pound bombs turning the earth into a volcanic wasteland. Richter slams the hatch shut as shrapnel rains down like hail. The realization finally sinks in. He isn't fighting a platoon. He isn't even fighting an army. He is fighting a production line that stretches from the French mud all the way back to the rolling mills of Pennsylvania. June 20th, 1944. 1800 hours, Sector 21, outside St. Lo. The Tiger's interior is a tomb of stale air and desperation. Richter's eyes are bloodshot, rimmed with the black soot of cordite. For 3 days, they have held this ridgeline. For 3 days, they have destroyed the same patch of ground. And for 3 days, the American Shermans have reclaimed it by sunset. Look, Hans whispers, pointing a shaking finger at the periscope. A single M4 Sherman, caked in dried mud and sporting a fresh coat of olive drab paint over a jagged weld line on its turret, is cresting the rise. It moves with a terrifying mechanical persistence. Behind it comes another, then 4 more. They aren't maneuvering with the tactical finesse of the Panzerwaffe. They are advancing with the grim certainty of a tide. That's the 3rd time I've seen that serial number, Meyer says, his voice flat, devoid of the bravado he held a week ago. I hid it in the drive sprocket on Tuesday. I put a round through the loader's hatch on Wednesday. And here it is. It's like killing a shadow. The psychological weight of the returner tanks has begun to break the German spirit. In the Panzer divisions, a casualty was a hole in the soul of the unit. A Tiger lost was a national tragedy, a blow to the Reich's dwindling resources. But to the Americans, a Sherman was a consumable. Richter watches through his glass as an American recovery crew, working under the literal nose of his 88mm gun. Hooks a tow cable to a disabled M4. They don't even look afraid. They work with the frantic efficiency of a pit crew at a racetrack. And they know that as long as the hull isn't warped beyond recognition, that tank will be back in the line before the German crew can even find a spare fan belt for their Tiger. They aren't laughing anymore, Hans. Richter mutters, watching the American commander stand tall in his hatch, casually chewing a piece of chocolate as his tank bounces over the debris of a German barricade. The Germans had mocked the Sherman for its height, calling it a barn door. They had mocked its gasoline engine, calling it a Tommy cooker. But now, the joke has curdled. The Sherman's height allowed for a superior internal layout that made repairs fast. Its gasoline engine was reliable and shared parts with thousands of trucks. Its thin armor was easily welded. The very traits the Germans ridiculed were the ones winning the war of attrition. Range, 1,000, Richter calls. But the command feels hollow. He knows what will happen. He will fire. He will hit. The Sherman will smoke. The crew will bail out into the safety of their superior logistical net. And by tomorrow, that same steel box will be refurbished, hosed out, and driven back up this same hill by a fresh crew of boys from Iowa or New Jersey. Fire, Richter orders. The Tiger recoils. The Sherman erupts in a shower of sparks and smoke. But as the American crew tumbles out, Richter doesn't see defeat on their faces. He sees the look of men who know they have 10 more tanks waiting for them at the depot. He looks at his own fuel gauge, nearly empty, and his spare parts box, completely bare. The laughter has moved across the line. The Sherman didn't need to be better than the Tiger. It just needed to be there when the Tiger finally broke. June 22nd, 1944, 2,000 hours. Abandoned farmstead, south of Villers-Bocage. The Tiger 213 sits motionless beneath the skeletal remains of a burnt-out barn. Its engine, the Maybach HL230, has finally surrendered. A cracked head gasket has turned the cooling system into a geyser of steam, and the left drive sprocket is weeping thick, black oil. Richter sits on the rear deck, his boots dangling over the heavy mufflers that are now cold for the first time in weeks. We could scavenge the parts from the Panther at the bottom of the hill, Hans suggests, though his voice lacks conviction. The Panther's transmission is a different model, Hans. Richter says softly. Everything we have is a masterpiece, and every masterpiece is unique. That is our curse. He looks across the darkening valley, and the American lines are a hive of activity. Through his binoculars, he sees the vultures again, the M32 recovery vehicles. They are working under portable floodlights now, seemingly indifferent to the threat of German artillery that has long since fallen silent for lack of shells. Richter watches a specific M4 Sherman being winched onto a heavy-duty trailer. It is the one with the mismatched armor plate on its side, the one they had killed twice already. He watches as the American mechanics don't even bother to tow it to a rear depot. They simply swap the entire turret right there in the field, lifting the heavy steel casting with a portable boom as if it were a Lego brick. They're not even repairing them anymore, Meyer says, climbing up to sit beside Richter. They're just rearranging them. One tank provides the engine, another the gun, another the hull. It's like a puzzle they can't fail to solve. The German Cat tanks, the Tigers and Panthers, were built by craftsmen in Essen and Kassel. They were hand-fitted, polished, and tuned. But in the mud of Normandy, that craftsmanship was a liability. When a Tiger broke, it stayed broken. When a Sherman broke, It was a donor. Suddenly, the evening air is punctuated by the sharp clank, clank, clank of fresh tracks. Coming up the road, bypasses the repair crew, is a column of 10 Shermans. They look identical. They sound identical. To the exhausted German crew, they look like a single machine being reflected in 1,000 mirrors. Remember what the major said in Paris? Meyer asks, lighting a crumpled cigarette. He said the Americans were soft, that they were salesmen and shopkeepers, not warriors. Richter watches the shopkeepers work. He sees an American lieutenant laughing with a grease-stained mechanic, handing him a crate of oranges. There is a terrifying casualness to their efficiency. They aren't fighting for Glauben und Volk, faith and folk. They are working a shift. The major was wrong, Richter says, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun is sinking behind a wall of olive-drab steel. They aren't salesmen, they're foremen, and we are just a line item they are crossing off the ledger. The Tiger is silent now, a 54-ton monument to a vanishing era of warfare. Richter knows that tomorrow, when the first Shermans crest this ridge, he won't be able to fire back. He will have to spike the gun, burn the maps, and begin the long walk toward the Rhine. He looks at the Lucky Legs Sherman one last time. It's back on its tracks, its engine idling with a smooth, rhythmic hum. It isn't a ghost. It's something much more frightening. It's a product. June 23rd, 1944. 0530 hours. Secondary defensive line, road to St. Lo. The dawn is gray and damp, clinging to the wool of Richter's tunic like a cold shroud. He stands atop a crumbling stone wall, looking back at the farmstead. The silhouette of his abandoned Tiger is a dark, jagged tooth against the morning mist. He had spent the night watching the American maintenance floodlights flicker out, replaced by the low, guttural growl of dozens of Wright Continental engines warming up. "Sir," Hans says, adjusting his rucksack. "The 12th SS is pulling back further east. If we stay, we'll be cut off by the armor's spearhead." Richter doesn't move. He is watching the road. Emerging from the tree line is a column of M4s so long he can't see the end of it. In the lead, with a fresh coat of mud on its tracks and its 75mm gun traversing slowly across the hedgerows, is Lucky Legs 2. Beside it rolls a Sherman he's never seen before. An M4A3E2 jumbo with thick, heavy slabs of additional armor welded to its front. Behind that, a Rhino Sherman, equipped with a Kulin hedgerow cutter, massive steel prongs made from the very German beach obstacles the Americans had cleared on D-Day. "They're using our own steel to cut through our defenses," Meyer mutters, his voice heavy with a dark irony. The realization is final. The German panzer crews had laughed at the Sherman's weak armor and its anemic gun. They had mocked the Americans for their reliance on numbers over skill. But as Richter watches the column advance, he sees the flaw in their arrogance. The Sherman wasn't designed to win a duel, and it was designed to win a war. It was a tank that could be shipped across an ocean by the thousands, repaired in a muddy field by a farm boy with a wrench, and put back into the fight before the German crew could even fill out the paperwork for a spare transmission. The Ronson was still a lighter, but the Americans had more matches than the Germans had water to put out the fire. "Look at them," Richter whispers. The Shermans don't stop to engage the abandoned Tiger. They simply flow around it like water around a stone. A single American recovery vehicle pauses briefly near the Tiger, its crew looking at the German behemoth with curiosity rather than fear. One mechanic spits on the ground, shakes his head at the complexity of the Tiger's interleaved wheels, and keeps driving. To them, the Tiger isn't a terrifying legend. It's an obsolete, over-engineered relic blocking the road to Berlin. Richter turns away. He leads his men into the shadows of the woods, moving toward the Rhine. Behind him, the roar of the American engines grows louder, a mechanical heartbeat that seems to shake the very earth. The Tommy cookers are no longer a joke. They are the heralds of an industrial tide that is sweeping the Reich away, one refurbished, mass-produced, unbreakable tank at a time.